Hey guys, welcome to The Big Bang Theory, a podcast where we give advice on things that we are just not experts on. Either way, we're glad you're here. Hope you learned something and laugh a little bit too. I'm super excited about today's topic because I feel like it's super highly requested because so many of us don't know how to fight. We don't know how to argue. We don't know how to communicate effectively. So TJ and I are going to try to teach you guys how to do that.
So we gonna fight?
Do you want to fight?
I'm not scared.
I can bring up a bunch of things if you want.
I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but you are right. It's interesting. Even using the word fight, right? It carries like a negative connotation, but the fact remains that in relationships, communication is so key, and it's easy to have conversations when everything is going fine. But what about those hard conversations? What about disagreements? And so I think a really good place to start with this is, first of all, not to run from fights or arguments. Like especially ones that continue to come up, they're coming up for a reason.
Agreed. And I think I'm going to go back here a little bit, but people think that if you fight, it's a bad thing, but actually it's not, because you're able to express your feelings. And even when you're mad, I worry about the people who don't fight. The people who don't fight are the ones who are holding everything in. And then one day it just explodes. And then the other partner has no idea. And then they want a divorce. And it's like, whoa, this came out of the blue. So fighting or having arguments or disagreements is actually beneficial and scientifically proven. I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that it was like couples who have like arguments or disagreements and can resolve them are the ones who are stronger than those who don't, quote, fight at all.
Yeah, there was a really interesting survey that I read. I think they surveyed over 1,000 people in committed relationships about how they handle conflict and how fulfilling and promising the relationships are. And what they found was that people who talked through conflicts were 10 times more likely to be happy with their relationships. As for the people who stayed silent, those who blamed their partner for the lack of communication were more likely to be unhappy. And so it backs up what you just said.
So what we're going to do is we have a list that we've compiled from our marriage and things that we do, and then also other things we found online, which we naturally do and we didn't realize. And we're going to walk you through it and kind of use examples from our life. And hopefully that will help you and your partner argue the right way.
Yeah. The first one that I think is really important is the idea of using I rather than you, right? And when I say that, what I mean is I feel. This is what I am experiencing right now, rather than going off and blaming and saying, well, you did that, you did this, rather saying, hey, I am feeling very frustrated as a result of this, rather than saying, you piss me off when you do this.
And the truth is, they may have pissed you off, but there's something psychological about it. So when you point at someone and say, you did this and you did this, they shut down. But if you can make it where it's something that you're saying, my feelings are hurt when this happens, or I feel really sad when this happens, there's something that puts you in like a weakened, lower place that helps other people be more understanding. It's psychological and it's crazy, but it works. And that's why therapists recommend we say, I feel, rather than you statements.
I think another powerful addition to that is to say, for example, if there's something that's happening that your partner, your friend, et cetera, is doing that's causing you to feel a certain way, is to be able to state, hey, when this happens, this is how I feel. I know that's probably not how you intended it, but I want to be able to communicate that to you to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. There's a difference rather than me attacking, because as Bong, as you just mentioned, when you say, when you do this, that makes me mad, automatically that person's going to go on the defensive. And so it's going to kill the conversation. Whereas if you say, hey, there's something I want to talk to you about, this and this happens. When this happens, this is how I feel, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, because I don't think you would have intended it that way. But right there, it's that there's a whole different way of communicating than just saying, when you did this, I got mad.
So the next tip is never, ever, ever call them names. Don't use personal attacks. You need to talk about the actual issue, which means whatever it is that's bothering you that day, talk about that issue. Don't bring up things from the past. Don't say, you're such an idiot, or you always do this. Just talk about the issue on hand. And going along with that is don't use threats. Don't say, I'm going to divorce you if you don't do this, or I'm going to leave you if you do this, or whatever it is. That doesn't solve the problem at all. And again, that person just feels threatened and backed into a corner.
Yeah. And when you come at it from that angle, you're never going to resolve the issue, because the other person's not the problem. It's whatever that issue is. And so I totally agree. Nothing is ever gained by threatening or calling names.
And it's like what you teach to kids. I feel like name calling is very immature. At that point, you're not really wanting to resolve an issue. You just want to make that other person feel bad. And that's not arguing correctly. That's really immature.
All that's going to do is exacerbate whatever issue it was that you were fighting over originally anyways. Like nothing has ever been solved by attacking somebody.
Right. If you call me names, I definitely am not going to fix whatever issue. If in fact I get on the defense and then I shut down, I'm not going to listen anymore. If you're calling me names, I'm not going to listen to how your feelings are hurt because of whatever I did, because you just called me a name and I'm done. We're lucky that we've never, ever done that in our relationship, but it's so unhealthy. If you guys are calling names, if you're doing personal attacks, you've got to stop now.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, as it relates to that is so many of our behaviors that we exhibit are learned behaviors. And so if you grew up in a household where you saw that modeled out, of course, you might feel like that's the normal way to do it. Then you also have to think about what you're teaching to other people within your home as well. So that's why we're always super careful when we have these conversations. We don't have a problem arguing in front of our kids, because we can still do it in a way where our kids know we love each other, but they can tell like mom and daddy are trying to figure out an area that they disagree on.
That's the thing, is we don't hide our disagreements from our kids. I feel like some parents do, like they wait till the kids go to bed and they have their disagreements. But I want our kids to see that in a happy marriage, you have two different people who live together and you're trying to make things work. We're going to disagree on so many things, and we do it in front of our kids. The reason why it's okay is we're respectful and we do it the right way. We never name call. Our kids have never seen us do that. And it's actually really good for your kids to see that. They're seeing the model behavior that you want them to have. And also for them to understand that it's normal to argue and disagree. You don't want them growing up thinking that they have to have this perfect marriage like they see on the Disney shows, So you need to model the marriage that you want your kids to have.
Absolutely. The next topic is listen more, talk less. I love the quote, like God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Okay, that was so cheesy.
It's cheesy, but it makes sense. Like, I think listening is super important, because how can you empathize with the person if you're not listening to them?
But tell me this, what does good listening mean though? It doesn't mean just standing there, letting them say whatever comes out of their mouth and then it's your turn. Right. Explain to the listeners, what does it mean to be a good listener?
So being a good listener, it's a part of it is obviously listening. It's closing your mouth, opening your ears, and listening to what they have to say. And then for me, once that person's done, being able to recite back to that person, this is what I'm hearing you say. And then you respond back to that person. This is what I heard you say. I want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. And then it gives that person the opportunity to say either yes or no, but at the very least, it also helps that person feel heard as well.
Sometimes I find it annoying though. No, I really do. Like sometimes when I say things and you repeat it, I'm like, I'm not a kid. You're speaking to me like a kid. I agree. That is technically what you are supposed to do. But it's like one of those things where sometimes I'm like, you weren't even listening and you can just repeat what I just said. And I'm like, just because you can repeat it doesn't mean you were listening. So for me, when TJ comes to me with something that's been bothering him that I was doing and he says it.
Which happens a lot.
All the freaking time. For me, it's almost like a physical thing. I will listen to him. I feel it like in my body and then I internalize it and I don't let myself get offended. Because sometimes what he says, it sucks because it's right. And so sometimes if he says whatever it is, I can't even think of an example because I'm such a perfect wife. It's been so long since you told me something. No, but when he says something and it sucks to hear, I sit with it for just like a millisecond in my soul and I'm like, oh, that sucked to hear, but it's true. And rather than getting defensive, I have to really look at it and be like, yeah, that's true. Really listening rather than being like I'm rubber and you're glue and whatever I say bounces, whatever that thing is.
Well, I think there's also there's different levels of communication as it relates to that. So initially, if this is something that's uncomfortable, if you haven't done had a lot of these types of conversations, I don't even know what I would call it, the parroting technique. It's not necessarily a technique, but your spouse, your friend communicates the way they feel. You listen, and then you kind of repeat back to them what they said. That's kind of an initial stage.
That is what therapists teach when you're starting out counseling, when you're still learning how to do it.
Exactly. Because what that also does is it helps that person who just communicated to you listen back and to where they can say, okay, this was a message I intended to send. Oh, and you understand it. What you explained a little bit ago, I think, is another level of communication to where you really feel it. You take that time to internalize it. And if any of you have ever been in this type of a conversation, you know what it feels like, where you feel like you're connected, you're making eye contact, you're both present with each other. That person speaks and shares the way they feel. You internalize it, but it's a feeling that you feel within yourself after you've communicated where you really feel like that person has understood you.
Yeah, no, you're going deeper than I thought.
But nonetheless, it is part of communication. There's a felt sense within you of if I've communicated something and I know that you've really listened, I can feel it within me.
Yeah, I agree. I know when you really understand what I'm saying rather than just saying yes to say yes.
Yeah, because there's something too, really feeling seen and heard. And especially when it comes to these kinds of communications, I can tell you, you want to get through an argument or bring an argument to a successful end, help that person feel seen and heard and felt. Like that is one of the quickest ways to help navigate through an argument, at least in my experience.
So the next tip that we have is acknowledge each other's feelings and points of view. So again, this takes practice. This was really hard for me to learn. And that is if somebody comes to you with an issue and it's about you, it's really hard not to get defensive and not to be like, yeah, but you do this and you do this and you blah, 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 whatever it is. You have to sit there for just a second with whatever they said and put your feet in their shoes. Is that the expression? Put your feet in I am the worst with expressions, you guys. Anyway.
I don't think that's actually the right way. It's like walk in their shoes. I'm going to hang on, stop. Take your shoes. I got to put my feet in your shoes.
Let me put my feet in your shoes. I can't understand you. And let me put my hand in your gloves. Sorry, guys. I did live here my whole life, but we just didn't use expressions. So they are still confusing to me. But anyways, when you can truly understand things from your partner's point of view, it really just changes things. When you can really say, yeah, I can see how that really hurt your feelings. Like it just shifts everything. When you can agree with your partner and say, yeah, I can see how that hurt your feelings. And I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it that way, but I'll try harder. Like that's probably one of the biggest things is seeing things from their point of view and not automatically becoming defensive. You
have gotten very good at that, by the way.
It comes from practice. Honestly, it comes from so many years of being told how often I mess up. I'm just kidding. But it just comes with practice.
Well, no, because you've done that a couple times. I'm trying to think of an example, but even recently we had a conversation and I remember telling you something that felt pretty vulnerable. And I knew that you probably weren't going to love to hear, but you paused for a minute and you're like, you know what? I can really see why you feel that way. And when you said that, within me, I could feel this dynamic tension just release. And I was like, oh.
Well, and that's what I was saying by saying that I feel something physically in my chest. Like when you come to me and you say, hey, I want to tell you something and it's not going to be very good to hear or whatever. And then you tell me it, I think it sucks because everybody wants to be a good partner. And so when you hear that you've done something that hurts your partner's feelings, you never want to hear that. But then being able to feel that and then being able to admit that, yeah, I could see where you would feel that way or whatever it is, then you let that go. I'll tell you something, when you can effectively resolve an issue, it brings you so much closer. And in fact, you're glad you had that issue because then you're even closer than you were before.
Well, yeah, there's a vulnerability that comes into it, especially when I shouldn't say especially when it's this, but for men, oftentimes it is difficult to be vulnerable, right? And so when your partner comes to you with something and it's a vulnerable thing and they express something to you, and for you to then hear them and feel them as opposed to just attacking or deflecting, there's just something that's so beautiful about that and so healing, I think, for me. So yeah, I really, that's something I've really appreciated about our conversations that we've had lately. There have been a number of times where, I've come to you and I've expressed something to you and you've been like, you know what, I could see why you would feel that way. The other thing that I think is important with that as well is, once again, it helps to reconfirm whether or not what that person was thinking was really actually accurate or not. So like, let's say that I've said something or done something to you. There could have been zero harm or, meant from me when I did it, but you could have perceived that entirely different than than the message I was trying to send. And so when you can come and be like, hey, you know what, you probably didn't mean it this way, but when you said this, it made me feel that way. I can be like, oh, well, no, that's not how I meant it at all. And I'm very sorry, but then helps me understand how to better communicate that to you in the future. But if you never bring that up with your partner, then you might be upset or offended at something that your partner had no ill intention with to begin with.
And that actually leads us to the next tip, which is give each other the benefit of the doubt. So when you go into this disagreement, give them the benefit of the doubt. They are a good person at the core, right? They're not purposefully doing something to hurt you. Maybe they are, but most situations, they won't be doing that. And so I actually have a good example. So TJ's parents came to visit us quite a while ago, and in the car, I remember it bothered me. This is why I still remember it. But in the car, we were talking about some famous guy. I can't even remember who it is, and how he was going out, like doing it with whoever he wants and like living some rascally life. And TJ was like, do you blame him? I would too. And I didn't say anything then because TJ's parents were in the car. But then I think later on, after they had left, I was like, hey, you said something in the car that really hurt my feelings. And he's like, huh? What? And I was like, you said like, good for that guy for going off and having sex with whoever he wants. And it made me feel like, is that what you want to do? Like, that sounds, not, I mean, you're married and you have kids and you can't go and do whatever he's doing. And it gave TJ the opportunity to be like, no, that's not what I want at all. But then he was able to explain whatever it even was. I honestly don't remember. But the point is, giving your spouse the opportunity to explain something that you may have misinterpreted, and then believing them when they tell you.
Absolutely. And I do remember that conversation very well.
Who was the dude?
It was John F. Kennedy Jr.
Oh, that's right.
And we were talking about how he had all these mistresses and whatnot. And I was not, by the way, I'm not advocating for it. I'm not saying it's okay to be married and go and sleep with all these other women. What I was saying, my point is if I was in that situation, I can't stand here right now and honestly say I would have done any different, because I don't know what that's like.
Not what you said in the car. You were like, whatever.
But that was what I intended to say. Like, right. It didn't come across that way. But it's like, I don't know what it's like to be leading a country, to be a handsome devil that every woman wants to be with. Like, I mean, I kind of know what it's like, but not really.
Okay.
Actually, I don't at all. But that was the point of it. But yes, yeah, I 100% like, that's a really good example, because that is not what I meant. I did not in any way intend to be like, man, I wish I could go sleep with all these women.
And you guys, that's like a minor issue. I wish so badly that TJ and I had something we could fight about on air.
You really want to fight, don't you?
Well, because we communicate very well. And I would love for them to see if something really, really hurt my feelings or hurt your feelings, how we have a fight, because it's really good. I mean, it sucks sometimes, but we are really good about it. And I think hearing one in real life people could see like how it is to healthily argue and then resolve an issue. So next time we get in a fight though, you guys, I'll pull up these microphones and be like, hold on.
We got to podcast this.
All right. So the very last tip, which is probably the most important tip, is never forget that ultimately you are a team. So you want to resolve the issue. You are not on opposing teams, and nobody's going to win if you act like a jerk.
100%. And here's the thing. In that moment, when things get heated, it's going to be hard to remember that, right? And so I think something to kind of add to that we haven't really discussed yet, but I think is worth noting right now. I think it's important to be able to pause, take a breath, and really just sit with things first. So for example, if someone comes to you, your spouse, your friend, your partner with something, and they're like, hey, when this happened, it really upset me, rather than immediately responding, take a moment and just a deep breath in and then breathe out and just give yourself a moment to pause. Sometimes that moment can be enough to be like, okay, I love this person. We're on the same team. I can enter in this relationship. Like, be true to yourself. Understand like what your emotions are feeling in that moment. And if you're too frustrated in that moment to remember that we're still a team, then maybe take a pause and be like, hey, I would love to have this conversation with you, but I'm not ready right now. But when I am, we'll finish this conversation. Because yeah, that's the worst thing you can do, is to start fighting, because at the end of the day, you two love each other and you're really looking to solve the problem and become closer as a result of it.
That's a really good point. Not everybody is ready to talk about things at the same time. So if you are one, or your partner is one who needs a minute, 30 minutes, a couple of hours, whatever it is, before you come back and talk about it, that's totally fine. Don't pressure people into talking just because you want to, because then they're going to feel cornered.
Yeah. And dude, that's one thing. And you know this about me. And that hasn't really happened so much with us, but I hate feeling cornered. Like, there's something about it with me that if I feel like I'm being cornered and people are pushing me, my immediate response is just to lash out, just to fight my way out of it.
Baby in the corner.
It's true. And I think most people are probably like that, but there have been a couple of times in my life where that's happened and I have not responded in a very positive way. So fortunately, we've moved past that. But yeah, absolutely. Like, these conversations, if you're going to have them, it's much better to have them from a place of like peace and like where you're more settled, as opposed to being really emotional and fiery in that moment, because then you're just going to say and do things that you will regret doing later.
Okay, no, we said we'd wrap this up, but I keep thinking of stuff. So if you guys keep having the same fight over and over and over again, you are doing it all wrong. You are not coming to a solution. You're not resolving it, and you're not even listening. Somebody's not listening if you keep fighting about the same dang thing.
Yeah, that's like a really good feedback loop of like, hey, we're not resolving these issues. And it gives you an opportunity to stop and really look at it and dive deeper into it, I think. The other thing that I would add, and I think this is kind of a good place to end it, is when you feel like you're towards the end of this argument, I think it's really important to come to like a mutually agreed upon resolution, right? To take a moment and make sure that your partner has had a chance to fully express themselves, that they feel like they've been heard and seen and felt, that you get an opportunity to do the same, and that you both agree like, hey, we've solved this, we've moved forward. And I think the other part that's super important is, when this happens next time, here's what we'll do to avoid the same type of fight.
That's awesome. All right. So to our challenge of the week, what we're going to say is go get in a fight with your partner.
Go fight.
No, but really, sit down with your partner and say, hey, I listened to this podcast. You should listen to it too. Let's have an argument the right way. And then you start with the I feel when this happens, and then you don't name call. You're going to listen more, talk less. You're going to acknowledge each other's feelings, give each other the benefit of the doubt, and then never, ever forget that ultimately you are on the same team.
And the best part about fighting is making up. You know what I'm saying?
All right, guys. Hope you have a good day and learned something new today. Bye.
Bye.
If you guys enjoyed today's episode, we please ask that you leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. It really helps spread the message. And also, if you have any friends or family members who might enjoy this, send it to them. Thanks, guys.